You wouldn't believe what happened to me this morning. How long have I been dreaming about this trip? 3 years? 4? Long enough for it to become one of the most important things in my life. And now, standing in front of my parents' house, I can't believe my eyes. The clock on my car's dashboard switched to 5:58 a.m., 2 more minutes until the exact time. I took a deep breath, trying to contain the excitement bubbling in my chest. I had spent 3 years working non-stop to make this trip happen, a dream vacation I meticulously planned down to the finest detail. From luxurious nights in Venice, to elegant riverside dinners along the Seine in Paris. My parents had never had the chance to travel abroad. I wanted to give them an unforgettable experience, something they would talk about for the rest of their lives. But the moment my mom stepped out of the house, dragging a silver suitcase that clattered against the porch steps, my excitement vanished. Behind her, my sister Emily also walked out with an identical suitcase. I frowned, irritation creeping into every cell of my body. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice as steady as possible. My mom turned back to me, smiling far too comfortably for the situation. "Oh, Hannah, I forgot to tell you. Your dad and I talked, and we decided that Emily will be going instead of you." I blinked. 1 beat, then 2. I couldn't process what she had just said. "Instead of me?" I repeated, my voice dry. "Yes, Emily's had a rough year, you know? She needs this. She needs to relax. I know you'll understand, Hannah, you've always been strong and independent, but Emily..." "But Emily, what?" I cut in, my breathing turning shallow. I looked at my sister. She didn't appear the least bit ashamed or guilty. On the contrary, Emily shrugged and gave me a satisfied smile. "Thanks for understanding, Hannah," she said, her voice sweet, yet utterly fake. I stared at both of them, feeling like I had just been stabbed in the chest. "Are you joking?" I let out a disbelieving laugh. "I've spent 3 years saving up, planning every detail of this trip. I paid for everything. This was my gift to you." My mom waved a hand dismissively, as if I had just said something trivial. "And I'm so grateful, truly, Hannah. But you're young. You'll have plenty of opportunities to travel. Emily needs this more right now. You can always book another trip later, right?" My head spun. My dad walked out next, silently dragging his suitcase toward the car without so much as a glance in my direction. He said nothing, didn't defend me, didn't show even a flicker of emotion. Because this wasn't the first time. This wasn't the first time Emily was prioritized. It wasn't the first time I was pushed aside like I was just an afterthought in this family. A numbness spread through my chest. The late nights planning the itinerary, the hard-earned money I spent securing 5-star hotels, the countless calls I made to reserve tables at the best restaurants, all of it? Now, for Emily. I took a deep breath, forcing myself not to scream in frustration. "Fine," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Go ahead. If you think Emily deserves it more than me, take her. But don't expect me to be happy about it." I opened the trunk, watching as the two of them loaded their luggage as if nothing was wrong. But in my mind, I had already made my decision. They could go. But I wouldn't let them enjoy what I had created. Not a single penny of mine would go toward making their dream trip a reality. The drive to the airport was silent. The tension in the car was so thick I could hear my own breathing. My mom whispered something to Emily in the back seat, while my dad just stared out the window, avoiding my gaze. Emily, acting as if nothing had happened, fiddled with her phone and giggled. I saw the light from her screen reflected in the rearview mirror. Probably watching TikToks or texting her friends about the amazing trip she was about to take. Anger and pain roiled inside me, but I held it in. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me upset. If they thought I would cry, beg to go, or show any weakness, they were wrong. They could go. But they wouldn't enjoy this trip on my dime. I pulled up to the airport drop-off zone, popped the trunk, and started unloading their bags. My mom, still acting like everything was fine, turned to hug me. "Thank you for understanding, Hannah. I knew you were mature enough not to make a big deal out of this. We love you. I didn't respond. Emily, pulling her suitcase along, turned to me with a smug smile. You're the best, Hannah. Enjoy your time at home. I let out a dry chuckle. Enjoy. Then, I turned and walked straight back to my car. They had no idea what was coming. As soon as I got home, I grabbed my laptop. My hands weren't shaking out of anger anymore, but out of sheer determination. I opened every booking and reservation I had carefully arranged over the past 3 years. Hands. Each confirmation email that popped up on my screen felt like a cut through the strings of their manipulation. The luxury hotels? Gone. The Michelin-starred dinners in Paris? No longer happening. The private tours I had booked in advance? Cancelled in an instant. I even contacted the airline to downgrade their seats to economy and reclaim the fare difference. They could still fly, but there would be no spacious seats or complimentary champagne. Finally, I leaned back in my chair, watching my inbox fill with cancellation confirmations. A wave of relief washed over me. They could go, but they wouldn't be enjoying the trip I had planned. About 12 hours later, my phone started vibrating non-stop. I glanced at the screen. Multiple missed calls from my mom. Then the flood of text messages began. Mom, Hannah, what's going on? The hotel says there's no reservation under our name. Mom, what did you do? Call me back right now. Emily, are you kidding me? You know we can't afford those hotels. Dad, we need to talk. I laughed. So, they had arrived and realized that nothing was waiting for them. No luxury hotel room, no private driver, no pre-booked fine dining experiences. They were stranded in Paris with no plan. Completely deserved. The next call came almost immediately. I stared at the screen, my mom's name flashing. I picked up. Hannah, what the hell did you do? The hotel doesn't have our reservation. The tours are all cancelled. I kept my voice calm. Oh, are you talking about the things I spent 3 years planning? The things I paid for? Didn't you decide I didn't need to be on this trip? Then why should I pay for it? Hannah, this isn't funny, my mom was practically yelling. We can't find a hotel last minute and the prices are outrageous. Good luck with that, I replied, my voice unnervingly steady. A dead silence stretched between us. Then, Emily screamed from the background. You're so petty, you cancelled everything just because you're jealous of me? I smirked. No, Emily. I just took back what was mine. If you truly deserve this trip more than me, then figure it out yourself. Mom, hang up. I don't want to hear this, Emily hissed. I heard my mom murmuring something to her before turning back to me. You're really hurting your family, Hannah. We're family. We don't do this to each other. I laughed. Family? Did you think about that when you replaced me with Emily? Did you think about that when you threw away all my efforts without a single apology? No, Mom. You only think about family when it stops benefiting you. I hung up. Silence. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled deeply. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely in control. They could call as many times as they wanted. But I wasn't the one sacrificing everything for them anymore. They chose Emily. Now, they would have to live with that choice. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing on the table. I sat in my chair, staring at the flashing screen. Mom's name again. This was the 18th call today. I reached over, silenced the ringer, and flipped the phone face down before continuing my breakfast. Since I had hung up last night, my phone hadn't stopped ringing. Messages flooded in so fast I didn't even bother opening them. But when curiosity got the best of me, I tapped into my inbox. Mom, Hannah, I can't believe you did this. Is this how you treat your family? Emily, you're so selfish. We're stuck in Paris with nowhere to stay. Do you have any idea how expensive hotels are here? Dad, you need to call back. This isn't worth going this far. I let out a bitter laugh. Not worth it? I had spent 3 years preparing for this trip. I had done everything to create the perfect experience for them. And they, without hesitation, removed me from the plan? But now, when everything had fallen apart, I was the selfish one? Not a chance. I stood up, poured myself another cup of coffee, and opened my laptop. With no vacation plans to worry about anymore, I started searching for a new trip. One just for me. But only a few minutes later, my phone vibrated again. Dad was calling. I sighed. In our family, my dad had always been the quiet one, rarely stepping into arguments between my mom and me. But if he was calling now, that meant they had pushed him forward to fix things. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Hannah? My dad's voice was low and tired. We need to talk. I'm listening, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Don't you think you've taken this too far? I let out a laugh. Too far? Dad, I just took back what was mine. Wasn't it you and Mom who decided I didn't deserve this trip? He sighed. We didn't mean to hurt you, Hannah. Your mother just thought Emily needed this trip more. You know she's had a tough year. And what about me? I cut in. Did you ever stop to think that I worked tirelessly for 3 years? That I also had moments of exhaustion and stress? Or is it just because I've always been strong, so I don't get to be prioritized? A long silence followed. I know you've sacrificed a lot. His voice softened. But we're family, Hannah. Family supports each other. I gripped my phone tighter. Support? I repeated, my voice dangerously even. So who supported me? Who cared about my feelings when Mom and Emily so casually took away the trip I spent years planning? Who stood by me when Mom told me I could just go another time? Silence. I took a deep breath. I don't need another lecture on family, Dad. Because in this family, I've always been the afterthought. Hannah, my dad started. But I didn't want to hear it anymore. Dad, if Mom and Emily were mature enough to decide that I didn't deserve to be on this trip, then they can also be mature enough to handle things without me. I ended the call before he could say another word. The phone kept buzzing afterward, but I didn't care anymore. I set it aside, picked up my coffee, and gazed out the window. The sky was clear and blue. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel responsible for fixing other people's messes. I wasn't the one who had to make things right anymore. They had chosen to leave me out. Now they would have to live with that choice. The next morning, I woke up to an entirely silent house. No blaring phone calls, no long-winded messages, blaming me or attempting to manipulate my emotions. Just silence. I made myself a cup of coffee and took it out to the front porch. The peace was almost unsettling. For years, I had been caught in the endless cycle of responsibility. Worrying about my family, trying to please my parents, proving that I was just as important as Emily. But this time, I didn't have to try anymore. I was no longer the one who had to fix their mistakes. It was terrifying, yet liberating. After finishing my coffee, I opened my laptop. The cancellation emails were still sitting in my inbox, a reminder that I had reclaimed control over my life. I glanced at my bank account. The money that was supposed to cover their trip. An idea struck me. Why not spend it on myself? I opened a new tab and typed into the search bar, "Solo travel for women." Within minutes, I was completely immersed in articles about incredible destinations for solo travelers. I had never considered this before. Every trip I had ever taken revolved around family, friends, or someone else. But this time, I wanted to do something just for me. And then, I saw it. An article about Florence, Italy, filled with images of cobblestone streets, charming sidewalk cafes, breathtaking art museums, and an atmosphere brimming with romance. I stared at the screen. Something inside me stirred. Excitement, anticipation, and above all, freedom. Without hesitation, I booked the flight. 3 weeks later, I stood in the middle of Piazza della Signoria in Florence, taking a deep breath. I was really here. No forced itinerary, no one deciding what I should do, no judgmental glances or expectations that I should sacrifice for someone else. Just me, my suitcase, and an entire city to explore. I spent my first few days wandering through the narrow streets, marveling at the historic architecture, savoring rich espresso at outdoor cafes. I visited the Santa Maria del Fiore Cathedral, staring in awe at its massive dome, then strolled along the Arno River at sunset, watching the golden light dance on the water. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. I didn't have to rush. I didn't have to worry about anyone but myself. I could sit at a cafe for hours, simply watching people pass by, without anyone rushing me. I could step into a tiny artisan shop, chatting with the owner, without feeling like I was wasting anyone's time. Everything belonged to me. One afternoon, I bought a soft leather journal from a small market stall and started writing. I wrote about the little things I loved: the scent of fresh bread on the streets, the way sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of cathedrals, the quiet serenity of sitting on the steps of Santa Croce, feeling the heartbeat of Florence. Each page, each word was a reminder that I was no longer living for anyone else's expectations. I was living for myself. One evening I had dinner at a small riverside restaurant, indulging in a plate of steaming hot pasta and a glass of exquisite red wine. As I gazed at the twinkling lights reflected on the water, I realized something important. I didn't feel lonely. For so long I had believed that traveling alone would make me feel lost in the vastness of the world, but in reality, I had never felt more whole. I had spent my life seeking validation from my parents, trying to please them, longing to be seen as equal to Emily. But right now, sitting alone in a foreign city, I realized that I didn't need that anymore. I was enough. Not for them. For me. When I returned to the US after 2 weeks in Florence, I felt like a different person. Not because the trip had changed me, but because it had helped me realize that I had never truly lived for myself. I stepped into my apartment, turned on the lights and looked around. Before, I had thought it felt too empty. But now, I saw it as mine. I unpacked my suitcase, carefully placing the souvenirs on my shelf: a small statue of David, a hand-painted ceramic mug, and the leather journal filled with my memories. Then I picked up my phone. "Mom, I hope you had a good trip. Maybe we should talk." "Dad, are you back? We can work things out." "Emily, don't think you can just ignore this." I skimmed through the messages, but this time, they didn't make me feel guilty or pressured. I set my phone down. There was no rush to reply. I had spent my entire life putting them first. Now, it was my turn. Before, whenever my phone rang with Mom or Dad on the screen, I would pick up immediately. It was what I had always done. I was used to being the one to solve problems, to be the first to smooth over any tension in the family. But this time, I set the phone aside and continued what I was doing. They could wait. 3 days after I returned, my mom called. I stared at the screen for a long moment before deciding to answer. "Hannah." Her voice was softer than usual. No anger. No accusations. "Mom," I replied, my voice steady. She hesitated. "I just wanted to know if you got home safely." I knew she hadn't called just for that. "I'm home," I answered simply. A long silence stretched between us before she sighed. "I know you're still angry, Hannah. But I want to talk." I remained silent. "We've thought a lot about what happened." My mom's voice softened, carrying a hint of regret for the first time. "I know I should have asked you before making that decision. I shouldn't have taken it for granted. I thought you would understand, but I didn't realize how much it would hurt you." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. This was what I had been waiting for. Acknowledgement. Not excuses, not words that twisted the situation to make me feel guilty, but a real admission of what they had done. But an apology alone wasn't enough. I opened my eyes, my voice colder than I expected. "And what do you want me to do with that?" My mom hesitated. "I'm not asking you to forgive us right away, Hannah. I just want you to know that your dad and I realize our mistake, and we truly want to make things right." I tightened my grip on the phone. "Mom, this isn't just about the trip." I spoke slowly, carefully choosing my words. This is about all the times you and Dad put Emily above me. This is about me spending my entire life trying to prove that I mattered too, only to never be treated that way." She fell silent. "An apology can't erase all the years of being pushed aside, Mom." My voice was calm but sharp. "If you really want to fix things, you have to do more than just say you're sorry." She took a long breath. "I understand. Can you give me a chance?" I thought for a long moment. Finally, I said, "You can start by respecting my boundaries. I won't let you or Dad guilt me anymore. I won't be the one who has to fix everything in this family. And if you truly want to make things right, you'll have to prove it, not just with words." A long silence followed. Then, she quietly said, "I'll try." In the weeks that followed, I kept my distance from my family. Not out of revenge, but because I needed to. I needed space to live my own life without being dragged into the messes they created. I started trying new things. Signing up for a painting class, joining a book club, spending more time with people who actually cared about me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to carry anyone else's burdens but my own. My mom still texted me occasionally, but she no longer pressured me. At least for now. It seemed like she was genuinely trying. Emily, of course, never called or messaged. I didn't expect her to acknowledge her mistakes, at least, not yet. But I no longer cared. I didn't need her validation. I had spent my entire life trying to earn my family's approval. But now, I realized, I didn't need it to feel at peace. As time passed, I noticed something. The silence from my family no longer made me anxious. Before, if a day went by without a call or text from my mom, I would feel uneasy. I was so used to being responsible for their emotions, for fixing every conflict, for automatically making myself smaller to keep the peace. But now, every quiet day was a day I could truly live for myself. I no longer checked my phone constantly waiting for their messages. I no longer felt guilty if I didn't respond right away. For the first time in my life, I felt free. The weeks after my return from Florence, I focused on things I had never allowed myself to prioritize before. I signed up for a weekend photography class, something I had always wanted to try but never found the time for. I joined a local hiking group and started exploring new trails, feeling the solid ground beneath my feet as I embraced the challenges of each path. I spent time reading the books I had bought long ago but never opened. I tried new recipes, without worrying about whether someone else would like them. And most importantly, I started planning my next trip. This time, just for me. I opened my laptop, scrolling through a list of places I had always wanted to visit. There were so many options, but for the first time, I wasn't thinking about what anyone else would enjoy. I wasn't planning to please anyone but myself. One Saturday afternoon, I received a text from my mom. "Mom, Hannah, I know you still need time, but I want you to know that I'm really trying to change. I won't pressure you anymore, but if one day you're ready, I hope we can talk like we used to." I read the message a few times, letting the words sink in. I knew she was trying. Maybe not perfectly, but at least she was starting to understand that I wasn't the same person anymore. I no longer felt the need to jump in and fix everything right away. I didn't have to comfort her or reassure her that I was still here. Ugh. I knew that if I chose to respond, it would be my decision, not something I felt obligated to do because of family pressure. A few days later, my dad called. This time, I answered. "Hannah?" His voice was low and slow. "I just wanted to know how you're doing." I smiled, for the first time not feeling weighed down by our conversation. "I'm good, Dad, really good." He was silent for a moment before replying. "I'm glad to hear that." No apologies, no justifications, but I could hear the sincerity in his voice. Maybe they would never fully understand me. Maybe Emily would never admit that she was wrong. Maybe my family would never change in the way I had always hoped. But that didn't matter anymore. I didn't need their validation to know that I was enough. A month later, I booked a flight to Japan. Not to prove anything to anyone, not to escape my family. but simply because I wanted to go. I wanted to see Kyoto in the fall, walk through Tokyo's night markets, stand atop an ancient temple and breathe in the crisp air of a country I had always dreamed of visiting. As I clicked the confirmation button, a deep sense of relief washed over me. For so long I had believed that happiness required my family's approval, that I needed them to accept me, that I needed their love in the way I had always longed for. But now, I realized that I was whole and thriving, even if they never changed. Because in the end, I had learned the most important lesson of all. I didn't have to sacrifice myself to prove my worth. I was already enough, strong, independent, and whole. Not for anyone else. For me. Hannah's story isn't just a personal experience. It reflects the reality of many people who have spent their lives trying to please their families only to be overlooked. It highlights an important lesson. Your worth is not determined by anyone else's recognition. Setting boundaries, respecting yourself, and stepping away from the cycle of unconditional sacrifice is the key to finding true freedom. Happiness doesn't come from making everyone else happy. It comes from living authentically, confidently, and independently. What do you think about Hannah's story? Have you ever experienced something similar, feeling like your efforts were unappreciated by your family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real-life stories about family and life.